Hot composters are a brilliant way of making compost at home really quickly, but if you want to go out and buy a hot composter, they can be pretty expensive. So today I'm going to show you how to make your own homemade hot composter that's easy to make, cheap, and most importantly, super effective. So let's get started. Hey everyone, how's it going and welcome back. Hot composters and hot composting is becoming increasingly popular, and for good reason. It's one of the quickest ways that you can make nice usable compost at home. In fact, using a hot composting method, you can get compost in a matter of weeks. Plus, it allows you to compost materials that you wouldn't normally choose to throw into a cold compost heap, things like perennial weeds and certain food waste like raw meat and stuff like that. But it does come with a downside, especially if you choose to buy an off-the-shelf commercially available hot composter. It's really quite expensive to get started. So last year I had the idea that I would try and build my own one at home, and I did. And I made a couple of videos showing literally just an introduction to what I had made and the materials and the mix of materials that I put in it to get it up to temperature. I made a video revealing the first ever haul of compost that I got out of it. Spoiler alert, it worked really well and I got so much brilliant compost. And I even made a video comparing my homemade one to an off-the-shelf commercially available hot composter. Well, since then I've received so many comments, either written down below the videos or sent directly to me, asking me all sorts of questions, everything from the materials I used to exactly how to build one. So I've been listening to all of your questions. You've certainly been asking lots of questions, and today I'm going to go through exactly how to build my homemade hot composter. So without further ado, let's get stuck in and let's start by talking about the materials and the tools that you're going to need. Right, so here are all the things you need to make the hot composter for yourself. The main thing that you need is this stuff. This is expanded polystyrene insulating board, and I would choose to go with 5 centimeters or 50 millimeters thickness. That's going to give you a really good level of insulation so that you can get those compost temperatures up. Now, what you might notice here is that I have thinner sections. That's because at the moment I haven't been able to source the thicker stuff at a half-decent price. So what I've done instead is I've ordered thinner insulating boards. These are 2.5 centimeters thick and they're way easier to get hold of. And instead what I've done is I've simply glued 2 together so that I have that 5 centimeter section and that it's nice and strong. The next thing that you're going to need then are 4 of these. These are tie-down straps or cam straps, and they're going to go round the side of the composter just to hold the little access door in at the bottom and to give it an extra little bit of rigidity, because as you put in compost materials, that's all really quite heavy and puts quite a lot of force on the composter itself. You're going to need some of this, not necessarily this brand. This is not a sponsored video. What you will need is an all-purpose adhesive and a dispenser gun if that's what you buy. And just make sure that you buy one that is suitable for sticking polystyrene together, because quite a lot of adhesives have certain chemicals and solvents in them that will eat through polystyrene, which is obviously not what you want. And then the last thing that you're going to need is either 1 or ideally 2 of these. These are compost thermometers. So that's all of the materials. Then in terms of tools, it's really simple. You need very few. You're going to need a ruler and a marker. Ideally, a nice metal ruler makes it even easier when it comes to cutting bits of the polystyrene. When you're cutting it, you can either use a heated wire if you're lucky enough to have one of those that's specifically designed for cutting through polystyrene, but otherwise any kind of blade will work. I've got a craft knife, or you can even use a bread knife from the kitchen. And then the final thing that you need is a drill with a nice wide diameter drill bit on it. We're going to use that to drill some air holes into the base later on. But that's everything that you need. So let's start the build. Absolutely no need to worry if you didn't get a chance to take down all of the materials and tools that I'm using. It's all included in the description below. In terms of the polystyrene insulating board that you need, you're going to need 6 pieces this size. That allows you to have 4 pieces to do the sides of it, 1 piece to make the top section, and 1 piece to make the base, and then all of those pieces join together to make a nice strong structure. In terms of size of board itself, the one I'm making today is going to be 1.2 meters in height and 45 centimeters in width. Now, the composter that I made last year was slightly larger than that. It was still 1.2 meters high, but it was 60 centimeters wide. What I would say is, while that was great, it was really big. And even with a garden this size, when it was running to temperature, I was struggling to get enough material to keep feeding it. So I think the 45 centimeter width polystyrene will make a composter that's just slightly smaller and a little bit more practical for most gardens. So the first thing that we need to think about is cutting one of these sections, and that is going to form the very front of the composter. That's because if you see most commercially available hot composters, they have a little access door at the bottom. That's because you put your raw material in at the top, it composts down, and then when you're ready to harvest your compost out of the bottom, you open the little access door and just pull it out from there. So what I found from experience is that the height of that door should be about 1/3 of the total height of this polystyrene. So this is 1.2 meters. So I'm going to start by marking 40 centimeters up from the bottom of one of these pieces of polystyrene. There you go. So you can see exactly how this is going to be. This will be the access door that will be loose and able to open. So the next thing we need to do is cut through this. And because it's nice expanded polystyrene that is super easy, you can use almost anything. What I find easiest is to use a bread knife. Now, obviously, please be careful if you're doing this. Take all of the adequate precautions and don't necessarily do what I do, which is cutting it on top of a rug. I'm obviously being very careful to make sure that I don't cut through into the rug. The other top tip when you're cutting polystyrene is, rather than trying to hack through it and saw all the way through the full thickness in one go, instead just glide the knife along in multiple thin cuts and you'll cut really nice and neatly through it. There you go. So now we have our 2 sections. This bit will be the main body of the composter, and this will be our little access door. So the next thing we need to do now is to construct the vertical sides and get them all stuck together. Now it's time to get to work with the other 3 sections. So let's start constructing the main body. What I would do is I would take one section and have it lying flat on the ground, and then we're going to attach the other sections to it. So this is where your adhesive comes in. Now, I would be quite generous with the adhesive here. You want to make sure that you're going to form nice, strong bonds between each piece of the polystyrene. So imagine this is the inside of your composter. You're going to run a long line of adhesive down each side. And once you have those 2 lines of adhesive, you're going to be attaching the sides onto it. So you'll see that I'm just pressing down on this. That just helps to spread out the glue between the 2 pieces, so it's going to adhere really nicely. The great bit about the glue that I'm using is it takes about 15 minutes to really start to set, and then another 24 hours to be fully hard. And that just gives you a little bit of working time. So you can see I've got one section done, and it's time to stick the other one on. Right, so we've got the 2 side pieces on now, and now we need to put on the front. And this is the best bit, is when you put the front on because it's all the same size, it makes sure that these pieces sit nice and square. So here's how it's going to be. Here is our little access door. It's going to go at the bottom of the composter. And the rest of it, which is going to be the main body, is going to sit up here. Now, warning, the only piece that you're going to be sticking is this larger section. This smaller section you do not want to stick, otherwise you're going to have an access door that isn't going to be able to open. So you can basically put it to one side and do the same. I'm going to run glue along these edges and then stick it down. And there you have it. That is the basic main structure built. We've got the 4 sides ready to go. So all you need to do now is leave this for the glue to properly dry. Like I said, the glue I'm using recommends leaving it for 24 hours so that it is fully dry. And a top tip, if you're leaving it to dry, it's always quite good to prop one side up against a nice vertical surface, and then you know that it's going to dry nice and square, as opposed to risking it sliding a little bit. The composter's already starting to take shape, isn't it? Well, now it's time to make the top section and the base section. And to do that, we're going to essentially make 2 plugs that will go into the top and the bottom and give it lots of rigidity, and it'll be a nice seal as well. So to do that, we're going to make it out of 2 pieces that we're going to cut out of one of these pieces of polystyrene. So the first section, which will be the very top, is going to be the same external dimensions as the sides of the hot composter. So that's going to be 45 centimeters by 55 centimeters, and we'll mark this onto here. And then the other piece is going to be the same dimensions as the internal dimensions of the sides of the composter. So in that case, it's going to be 45 centimeters by 35 centimeters. Now, what I tend to do is just knock a couple of millimeters off those internal measurements, just so it's not too tight and so that it doesn't basically jam. So let's mark those out and we'll start cutting. Again, just using a bread knife, making lots of nice, gentle, shallow cuts until you cut through. So here's one part of our top section. And here's the smaller part of our top section. So now you can see when these 2 are glued together, what I mean about it being like a plug type. So the next thing to do then is to measure in the 5 centimeters all the way around, so you know then that when you stick this down, it's going to be nice and central. So now we have nice clear markings, so we know exactly where to stick that central plug section onto. And you don't need to worry about there being marks. This is going to be the underside that's not going to be seen. Likewise, you'll see that we have a cut edge. You don't need to worry about that, because that will be on the back side of the composter, so that you can have the nice neat front section where you're going to see it. So now that we have this cut out and marked, and the little central plug section ready to go, all we need to do is glue this to this with the same adhesive. And there you have it. There's our top section, and it's also going to be our base section. So all you need to do to make the base is repeat this process a second time so that you end up with 2 of these pieces. And then once you have the same as the side sections, leave the glue to dry for as long as is necessary until it's properly rigid, and then we'll move on. Oh yeah, the other top tip, keep a hoover nearby. Cutting polystyrene is so messy that you're only going to get in trouble, so it's easier to keep on top of it and keep hoovering up those little bits as you go. Okay, so now the glue has dried on the bottom and the top sections, we can finish them off, and what we need to do is drill some holes through them. So in one section, which is going to be your top section, all you need to do is mark the center point and drill one single hole through that. I've found that the top section doesn't need very many holes for ventilation. One is fine, and in fact, in that single hole, I tend to put a thermometer down it instead, and that allows me to measure the ambient air temperature above the compost. For the base, however, you want to make sure that you have a real grid work of holes. So you'll see that I've actually drawn equally spaced lines, and at each of those intersections, I'm going to drill a hole. That's going to give lots of airflow to the underside of the compost. As it heats up and the heat rises, it's going to pull more air in from underneath, and that chimney effect is going to help keep the compost going and keep that reaction really firing. So this is where the drill comes in. I've got quite a wide diameter drill bit. Realistically, providing it's not a really fine one, you can use whatever size you have and whatever suits. So all I need to do now is drill the holes into these. Now, you need to do this on a proper workbench or something like that, or if you're going to be doing it on the floor, use some of the old polystyrene offcuts so that you can drill through, and then you know that you're not going to damage your flooring or damage your drill bit or something like that. So there's the first hole drilled. One thing I've noticed is that as you drill the polystyrene, the little bits tend to get clogged in the hole. So all you need to do is get something like a pen and just poke them through to clear the hole out. And then that is the top section completely finished. And now on to drill the base section. It takes a load of time and it is mega messy, but truthfully, it's really good fun. If this is the first time you're watching a video made by me and you're liking it, please have a look at the rest of the channel. There are loads of videos that I'm sure you're gonna love. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing. Doing so really helps support the channel. And to do that, all you need to do is hit that button down below. Okay, so it's the next day and I've given the glue a full 24 hours so that it can harden, and now we can start to put the composter together. And that's one of the great things about designing it like this, is that all the separate parts come apart. So if a bit gets damaged, it's really easy to replace, it's really easy to put together, and it's really easy if you want to disassemble it and move it somewhere else, because it's really light as well. So if you've been following along, this is now what you should have also. You should have a top section that's got a single hole drilled into the top of it. You should have a base section with a whole grid work of holes drilled into it. And then you should have the main body of the composter with the little detachable front door. So I'll show you how it goes together now. With the base plate sitting on the ground, then all you need to do is slide the top, the main body of the composter on top. Like that. And you can see that by making the base and the top almost like a plug shape, it sits really snugly onto the base. So it's not going to just slide off from underneath at some point, and it helps give the whole structure that little bit of extra rigidity. So then with your front section, all you need to do is push it onto place, or push it into place is the correct thing to say. And there you have it. Now, earlier on, you saw that I mentioned using cam straps. So this is where they come in. These help to give the overall structure even more rigidity, because you can imagine the forces as you put more and more composting materials in. Those forces are pushing outwards against the walls. The other thing it does is it helps hold the little access door in place. So what I do is I use two of these cam straps, one at the bottom and one at the top of the access door, and then another two, one just above the access door and one near the top of the composter. So let's stick those on. There you go, and you can see just how easy these attach on. They're really handy to use. They're going to hold this door nicely in place until you want to either have a look at how your compost's getting on, or when you want to actually start to harvest some of the compost out of the bottom. Then all you need to do is very simply loosen the cam strap and you can let them drop to the bottom to open the access door. So that's everything about the base. Now we'll get the top finished. So that's the cam straps around the top section of the composter fitted. It's all lovely and secure, so all we need to do now is pop the lid on. And a bit like the base, because it's a plug shape, it fits on really, really snugly. That's going to make sure that you keep all of that precious heat inside the composter rather than letting it escape. And it also helps secure the lid on and give the whole structure even more rigidity. The final thing to add is either 1 or 2 of these compost thermometers. At a very minimum, you're going to want one, and you put this spike into your compost material inside the composter so that you can check on how it's getting on. But what I recommend is getting a second one, and I put the second one through the hole in the top of the composter. That way you can keep an eye on the ambient air temperature, which is above the compost itself. The reason for this is it gives you a quick idea of how well your compost is getting on without opening the lid. If it's cool, there's probably not much going on in your compost. If it's hot, you know that your hot compost is going to be exactly that, really, really hot. By doing that and simply looking at the thermometer on the top, you reduce the number of times that you're lifting that lid, because every time you lift the lid, you're going to be letting some of that precious heat out, and it just is a really handy way of keeping track of how this is getting on without even needing to touch the lid. So there you have it. That's all there is to making your very own homemade hot composter. Super quick, super easy. Now, when it comes to actually siting this, once you've picked your location, I would recommend setting this just slightly above the ground. You could set it on some bricks, or what I've done with my other hot composter is I've used some of the offcuts of polystyrene just to lift it that little bit off the ground. Doing that helps to improve the airflow through the holes in the base, and that really, really helps. Now, I get that it's not exactly the most attractive of things, but the important thing is that this is a really effective garden tool, and having made one myself and having used it for a year, I found it to be super effective. The quality of the compost, the quantity of the compost, and the speed that I could make it has really, really blown me away. And I think you will have the same kind of success if you try making one of these for yourself. The other benefit is cost. If you want to go out and buy a commercially available hot composter, they are by no means cheap. This is going to save you a whole load of money. And the really important thing here is the success in hot composting isn't necessarily the hot composter that you buy, it's the method that you use when you're making the compost itself. It's all about the materials that you use, the mix of the materials, and the correct ratios. That's where the magic really happens. So I hope you find that this video has been useful for you and that it's been interesting. I'm really interested to hear your comments. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Are you going to have a go at making one of these? Have you made one already? It would be brilliant to hear from you. If you've enjoyed the video, give it a like. If you haven't already, subscribe and make sure to hit that bell icon, because that way you'll be notified when I post my next video. And until next time, see you later.